Indiana Jones, one of the greatest action heroes of all time. I'm guessing most of you watching are likely fans of this franchise, so I don't need to explain much. But one thing I am here to explain is Indy's interesting and somewhat bizarre video game adaptations. Now, compared to the likes of Star Wars, which is another Lucasfilm property, Indiana Jones doesn't really have as many games under his belt, but I thought it'd be fun to look back at a few memorable ones before the 5th film, Dial of Destiny, drops. Yeah, so think of this as kind of a spiritual successor to that one Angry Video Game Nerd episode. So, without further ado, let's take a look at a few beloved indie games.
A man has fallen into the river in Lego City.
Now, chronologically speaking, this is not the first Indiana Jones game released, but it's the one I have the most memories of, and some of you watching probably do too. This is Lego Indiana Jones: The Original Adventures, released by TT Games in 2008. Unlike all the other games I'll be discussing in this video, this is the only one to be a direct adaptation of the films rather than being its own standalone adventure. This game lets you play through the entire Indiana Jones trilogy in the world of Lego. If you know about the Lego video games, you know what makes them so iconic. The simple pick up and play design that everyone can understand, the humor where the characters only mumbled before they switched over to voice acting in later games, and even the collectibles that draw in the completionists. All these reasons are why people have a soft spot for the Lego games. They're just a good time and they never really frustrate the player. Now, I should probably talk about the game itself instead of Lego games in general. So, here we go. In Lego Indiana Jones, you can play through all 3 of the classic Indiana Jones movies in Lego form, which means they take some creative liberties when adapting the source material. Yeah, this is Indiana Jones, which means that most of the main antagonists of the movies are, you know what they are. So, in this game, they simply refer to this faculty as enemy soldiers. No hearts get ripped out in Temple of Doom either. Interestingly though, a lot of the other deaths are kept mostly intact. The face melting scene in Raiders has these Pac-Man looking ghosts, but it still feels like the same scene. Mola Ram gets eaten by crocodiles again, and Donovan's death is the same, minus him decomposing in graphic detail. We do have 3 other games to look at, so I don't want to spend much more time with this game, so I'll give it my final verdict. That's one thing I'll be doing with each game in this video. I'll be rating each of them by the end of the section where I talk about them, and so for Lego Indiana Jones, I will rate it 4 brutally killed minifigures out of 5. I loved it as a kid, and I'll continue to love it probably forever. The next game for this video is Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb, released by LucasArts in 2003. Now, I was initially going to review the Infernal Machine, which is a predecessor of sorts to the Emperor's Tomb, but this game in particular is the one I grew up playing, so I went with it instead. Anyways, on to the game. Level 1 takes place in Ceylon, where Indy searches for an artifact located in the Temple of the Black River Goddess, called the Heart of Koruwatu. He manages to find it, but he gets jumped by this dude who's kind of just a Craigslist Belloc. Later, Indy is approached by some people who want him to search for the tomb of the first emperor of China, hence the title, Emperor's Tomb. So off the bat, let's discuss the controls. This is the Steam version, so all of this is on the keyboard. Q lets you do the somersault dodge move, which also functions as a faster way to move around. The mouse is actually how you attack. The left mouse button is just basic punches, but the right mouse button does this cool shoulder dash attack like it's out of Wario Land. This game also utilizes an inventory system. Indy is already pre-equipped with his iconic whip, but also a canteen which can restore some health when it's low. Plus, you can refill the canteen at these fountains. Another cool thing this game utilizes is the weapons mechanic. So aside from his whip, Indy usually does not have any weapons to use against enemies, except there is a way to use weapons. By theft. By fighting enemies with weapons, whether they be knives or even guns, they will always drop their weapons when they get hit to the floor. Doing this allows you to pick their weapon up by pressing E. Hell, even things like wooden planks and bottles can be used as weapons. The sky's the limit when it comes to this game at this point. Anyways, you probably want to know what you actually do in this game besides defeating enemies. Well, it's sort of a mixture between collecting things and solving puzzles. Like, for example, in level 2, Indy sneaks into the Prague castle to find the dragon shard shard. However, before we can get this dragon shard, we must do this long and tedious puzzle that isn't even that hard, but it takes up a lot of the gameplay in this level the moment it's introduced. A lot of running around the castle, finding things to complete the puzzle, then running all the way back to the basement to solve parts of it, over and over and over again. By the end of it, however, you then get to fight this weird large mutant guy. So that's cool, I guess. You'd think that'd be the end of tedious sections in these levels, but level 3, the very next level, decides to throw in another one. By the end of the level, you must find 4 special coins in order to open the door to the final boss of the level. That wouldn't be so bad if it weren't for the fact that the swimming controls are awful. They are probably some of the worst swimming controls in a game, period. And that is saying something. In the end, that's all the relevant stuff I can say about this game, but to be honest, I still kind of like it. While yes, the gameplay can get very repetitive at times, and the puzzles kind of overstay their welcome, and elements of the game being a little strange, like the aforementioned mutant guy, but also this big crocodile in level 1. But after all, this is a universe where the Ark, Holy Grail, and aliens all exist, so anything is possible at this point. I think I'll give this game a rating of 3 giant crocodiles out of 5. Not better than the Lego game in my opinion, but I still have a soft spot for it. The third game for this video is Indiana Jones and the Staff of Kings, released by LucasArts in 2009. This game might honestly be the strangest one out of all the ones I've talked about thus far, because this game, while being released on the PlayStation and even DS, is kind of a Wii game at heart. What do I mean by that? Well, I'd love to show you, but my copy of Staff of Kings on the Wii doesn't want to work anymore for whatever reason, so I'll have to resort to the PS2 version. But I think my point will still stand no matter what, so let's get into it. Level 1 shows Indy venturing into Sudan, attempting to recover some artifacts from the Nubian pyramids before his German rivals do. For starters, I'll briefly talk about the graphics. Usually I don't really talk about graphics, especially not in something like an Indiana Jones game, but compared to Emperor's Tomb, Staff of Kings just kind of looks uglier to me. It's weird that that's even the case considering they are 6 years apart. It really has to do with Indy himself, who for some reason they gave these big weird looking eyes, which makes him look really creepy looking. Also, it's worth noting that they also decided to censor a certain symbol on the enemies in this game. I'd expect it in something like a Lego game, but I don't know why they choose to censor it in a more mature game. But enough about it visually, let's talk about how it is control-wise. Earlier, I said that this is a Wii game at heart, and it still shows in the PS2 version. Pretty much everything you do as Indy feels like motion controls turned into button controls. That's not to mention that there is no jump button as far as I'm aware of. Instead, X is the attack button, and oh boy, don't even get me started on the combat. In this game, it's just very sluggish, where the game pauses the action to tell you about a move that you honestly could have learned on your own. Oh, and there's one more thing I should mention about the gameplay. QuickTime events. No, this game isn't Resident Evil 4, yet it acts like it is with these QuickTime events. These are really strange though, because instead of making you mash a button like X or any of the other face buttons, you usually are mashing the shoulder buttons, which is primarily why I think this game feels more like a Wii game than a PS2 game. But hey, at least it's just pressing buttons compared to waggling my arms around. So in short, that's Staff of Kings. It's definitely the weakest one so far, but it isn't that bad. I'll give it 2.5 QuickTime events out of 5. But trust me, the Wii version probably would have gotten a 1 out of 5 from me, so I think that rating is pretty generous.
But all my boys out there, we all know that what we're really looking for is Atlantis.
And the final game for this video, and the one which is probably the most nostalgic for some of you watching, is Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, released by LucasArts in 1992. Out of all the games featured in this video, this one is the most unique in terms of gameplay. Each game before this, you played with a controller and you ran around in 3D environments. However, Fate of Atlantis is a point-and-click game. Like before, I'll briefly go over the main plot before diving into the gameplay, which, considering this game is about finding Atlantis of all things, should be interesting. So let's get started. The game opens in Barnett College, where Indy searches the museum for a specific kind of statue referred to as the Horn Statue. It's revealed that Brody and this new guy who goes by Smith were the ones that wanted the statue, as hidden inside of it is a little metal bead. But surprise, Mr. Smith, whose real name is actually Klaus Kerner, is a no-good double-crosser. Not like we've seen that trope in Indiana Jones before, and makes off with the bead. It also turns out that this Kerner guy was targeting archaeologists, with his first target being Indy, and his next target being an old assistant to Indy, a woman by the name of Sophia Hapgood. Indy manages to find where she is located, since she later became a psychic and started doing seminars. It's in these seminars that we find out that she has a very big fixation on Atlantis. Later, Indy meets up with her and convinces her to help him stop his German rivals from finding the lost city of Atlantis and foil their plans in world domination. That's as brief as I can explain the plot, because believe me, there is a lot more to it, but obviously I want to go over how the gameplay is, so let's talk about that. As I said earlier, this is a point-and-click adventure game through and through. The game consists of you, whether you're controlling Indy or Sophia, going to various locations around the world, and doing what else other than clicking on things, of course. But not just clicking, but you also talk to people a lot. And that's kind of all this game is. Clicking on things you can interact with, talk to people, solve light puzzles, and then move on to the next location. Not to mention, talking to people could sometimes be trial and error. Like this guy. We had to get him to let us in so that we could talk to Sophia, but he won't let us in unless we go through all these pieces of dialogue, and if we get lucky enough, he will let us in. Of course, if you already played the game, you know what to say to him, but as someone who's playing this for the first time, it got really tedious. I will say though, that one unique aspect of this game, other than the gameplay, is the split paths. Later in the game, you're given 3 options to continue with. Path 1 is where you keep Sophia with you and solve puzzles with her help. Path 2 is where you continue alone and do more fighting than puzzles. Path 3 is where you also continue alone, but the puzzles become much harder and there's less combat. And I'll give them props for that. That's honestly a really cool feature of this game. And I know, it might be a bit of a hot take to say I didn't enjoy this one that much, but I could see why people might like it, especially the ones who grew up with it. It had so much of a legacy that the Wii release of Staff of Kings included this as a free unlockable. Like, what? So yes, since I'm not too much of a fan of this game, and point-and-click games in general, I will rate this game 2.5 capybaras out of 5. It has charm, and I like the 3 route gimmick, but this kind of game is just not for me. Anyway, I think that will do it for this video. Indiana Jones is one of my favorite movie franchises ever, and so I wanted to give it some love in time before the next and potentially final movie comes out. Also, to any future viewers from July, feel free to leave me your Dial of Destiny opinions in the comments section as well. As for the video game side of Indy, it's kind of a mixed bag. I like a few of his games, but some of them are just kind of mediocre. Does this mean we won't be seeing any more Indiana Jones games? Well, actually no. In 2021, the studio Bethesda announced that they were making a brand new Indiana Jones game with an original story. When I first heard that, it was surreal because I never thought a new indie game would ever happen. Flash forward to 2023, radio silence. Yeah, it's unknown if this project will actually see the light of day since there have been very little updates on it. But again, to any future viewers who might be playing the Bethesda game, let me know if it's good or not in the comments. But that's all I have left to say, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next video, and take care.